This is a Sports Catastrophe production. Hey there, hello there. It's Jeff Cutter Diamond. Welcome you to another Sports Catastrophe on this day. And this is a very somber on this day. In 1994, on this day, the motorsport world lost one of its great individuals as Ayrton Senna had a gigantic accident that cost his life. Now, the problem is this wasn't the only issue happening at the San Marino Grand Prix. So anyway, let's give you some context. Heading into the third race of the season, Michael Schumacher was first in the very first championship, with Rubens Barrichello second. Damon Hill took on third place, and all that. There were actually two driver changes into this race. J.J. Leto replaced Jos Verstappen, Max's father, at Benetton. Leto actually was injured, so Jos had to step in. Eddie Irvine still had his suspension, so he was replaced with Andrea de Cesares. So anyway, the first qualifying session happened. Rubens Barrichello hit the curb at 225 kilometers per hour, or 140 miles per hour, launching him in the air. He was knocked unconscious, and all that. And his car rolled several times after landing before coming the rest upside down. Thankfully, though, Barrichello would suffer only a sprained wrist and broken nose. Barrichello's tongue actually blocked his airway during the crash. And thanks to FIA Dr. Sid Watkins, it saved his life. Senna was looking over him at the medical center, too. Barrichello could not race, and all that. Anyway, Saturday qualifying happened. And 18 minutes into the final qualifying session, Roland Ratzenberger failed to negotiate the Villeneuve curve in his car. He hit the opposing concrete retaining barrier head-on and was critically injured. Although his survivor cell in the car was intact, the force of the impact had a basal skull fracture. Ratzenberger was in his first year at F1. He actually ran over a curb at a chicane in his previous lap, which damaged his front wing. But rather than return to the pit lane, he decided to continue. And it failed miserably. He had a front wing failure, and he was traveling at 195 miles per hour, or 314 kilometers per hour. I mean, honestly. But, I mean, he didn't have anything. The session was stopped because they had to attend to Ratzenberger and all that. 48 minutes later, the session was restarted. And at 2:15 local time, it was found out that Ratzenberger had died 8 minutes after being in the hospital. It marked the first Formula One death in 12 years. The last time it happened was 1982 in Montreal at the Canadian Grand Prix, and Riccardo Paletti was killed after being smashed into when his car did not start. I know it was. People probably thought that it was Gilles Villeneuve who was the last F1 death before that. Before Ratzenberger. Nope, it was not. However, 8 years in 1986, Elio De Angelis died in a test circuit in France. Professor Sid Watkins, then head of the F1 medical team, recalled in his memoirs Senna's reaction to the news, saying that Ayrton broke down and cried on my shoulder. Anyway, Sid Watkins said Senna should not race the next day. What else do you need to do? You've been champ 3 times. You're the quickest driver. Senna then said, Sid, there are certain things over which we have no control. I cannot quit. I have to go on. Senna would win the pole position, as Michael Schumacher would be second, and Gerhard Berger would be third in qualification. All that. So, anyway, Roland Ratzenberger would have been on the grid for the F1 in the final position, and that Paul Belmondo was actually given a chance to qualify, but he said no, he couldn't do that. It had a giant lasting legacy. When the drivers were briefed and all that before the race at Imola, they actually said that they would have the Grand Prix Drivers Association would reform it with Senna, Gerhard Berger, Michael Schumacher as directors, all that. The association pressed for improvements to car and circuit safety in the wake of Imola. And in 2003, F1 said they could give the Hans device. So, it was time for the race. And at the start of the race, J.J. Leto had stalled his Benetton. Unfortunately, Pedro Lamy was blocked off and slammed into Leto's car. Both drivers were out. They didn't stop the race. They just had the safety car and all that. So, anyway, people actually complained that the safety car did not go fast enough, and that's why drivers had to go reduce speed and their tire temperatures cool down. So, anyway, the race was started in lap 5. Jonathan Palmer and Murray Walker were doing the commentating for the BBC, the legend Murray Walker. And all that. On the 7th lap, just a few laps after the race was restarted, Senna was in the lead over Schumacher. Senna was going 190 miles per hour or 305 kilometers per hour, and actually could not take the turn at the Tamburo left corner, and struck the unprotected concrete barrier at a speed of 131 miles per hour. Senna had a good effort to brake, but it still was too fast. Basically, Senna was killed instantly, all that. And track officials actually found an Austrian flag in his car. If Senna had won, he would have raced it after the race in honor of Ratzenberger. So the red flag came out, and the race was stopped. Senna was treated and all that. Anyway, it was amazing all that. The world feed was supplied by RAI. Oh, that. However, the pictures were too upsetting for general viewing, and the BBC decided to focus on their own camera in the pit lane, and ESPN did that too. Senna was lifted from his car, and 15 minutes later was airlifted directly to the hospital, becoming the third driver to do so, to get to that specific hospital. Barrichello, Ratzenberger, and now Senna. And 37 minutes after Senna's crash at 2:55 local time, they restarted the race. In the end, Michael Schumacher did win the race, winning by 54 seconds over Nicola Larini in the Ferrari. Italy got a second place finish. Schumacher and his Benetton. Third place went to Mika Hakkinen in his McLaren. Karl Lellinger in his Sauber took fourth place, kind of in honor of his fallen fellow Austrian Ratzenberger. Katayama took fifth in the Tyrrell for Japan, and David Hill took sixth in his Williams. Senna's teammate. So sixth place. In the end, only 13 drivers completed the race. Heinz-Henrik Frentzen took 7th. Martin Brundle took 8th. You know him from F1 coverage. Mark Blundell took 9th. Johnny Herbert took 10th. Olivier Penny took 11th. Eric Bernard took 12th. And Christian Fittipaldi took 13th. Drivers who did not finish the race were Desasaris, who spun off, Alboreto, who had a wheel problem, Morbidelli, who had an engine issue, Pierluigi Martini spun off, David Brabham, the son of Jack Brabham, spun off, Bernard Gocho with his engine, Oliver Beretta of Monaco had an engine problem, Gerhard Berger couldn't do it because of his suspension issues, Senna, you know why, Eric Comas, JJ Leto, and Pedro Lamy. Post-race, Schumacher says, I can't feel satisfied, I can't feel happy, because of all the issues that happened, not just with Senna's fatal crash, but with Ratzenberger. 2 hours after Schumacher finished the finish line at 6:40 local time, it was released that Ayrton Senna had died. Senna was killed instantly, but they kept him on life support due to Italian law. The autopsy recorded the cause of death as head injuries caused by an impact from the wheel and suspension and all that. It was a black day for Grand Prix racing. So the next race was in Monaco, the legendary Monaco race, which Senna was, I think, a 2 or 3 time defending champ, if memory serves me correctly. And, he was planning to race that. People thought that they might have had to postpone F1 for a while. And it would have been understood. Anyway, safety measures were the entry and exit of the pit lane to be controlled by a curve to force cars to run at a reduced speed. No team mechanic would be allowed onto pit lane surface except for pit stops. And a draw was actually arranged to determine the order in which cars can make pit stops and be limited to emergencies. 4 days after this tragic event, on May 5th, 1994, Senna was given a state funeral, and why wouldn't he be? 500,000 people lined the streets to watch the coffin pass. And then Prost, who was not in F1 at the time, who retired after winning the 93 title, was among the pallbearers. The big issue was that Max Mosley, who was the president of the FIA, actually went to Ratzenberger's funeral instead of Senna's. Mosley did say that I went to Ratzenberger's funeral because everyone went to Senna's. I thought it was important that someone went to his. I'll be honest with you, I'm surprised that a few people in the F1 community didn't just go to Senna's funeral and then fly from Brazil to Austria for Ratzenberger's. Or maybe they did and we just don't know. Anyway, the 94 Imola layout was never again used for the F1 season. In fact, the circuit was heavily modified following the race because they also had major accidents for Gerhard Berger in 89 and Nelson Piquet in 87, from a high-speed corner to a much slower chicane. There would be a lot of things going on all that. The Grand Prix Drivers Association was reformed to fix with this problem. The front 2 grid slots in Monaco were actually left empty, which were painted with Brazilian and Austrian flags. However, injuries were not limited to that 94 accident with Senna. 2 weeks after Imola, Karl Wendlinger actually had a practice issue at Monaco, which left him comatose for several weeks and ended his 94 season. Pedro Lamy would have season-ending broken bones at a testing session at Silverstone. So the Hans device for driver restraint was finally placed in 2003, 9 years too late. Senna was not the last driver to die in an F1 accident. Jules Bianchi, who had a massive crash at the 2014 Japanese Grand Prix, was still dealing with his injuries and died as a result of those injuries in 2015. There were 3 trackside marshals who were killed because of crashes. A massive trial took place that saw 6 people charged with manslaughter under Italian law with manslaughter in connection with Senna's death, but they were all later acquitted. and it took 11 years to conclude due to appeal and a retrial following the original verdict of not guilty. So it was just so terrible. A very black day in sport indeed. As Ayrton Senna, who won 3 world titles, who was well beloved and still had the racing spirit in him, just sadly passed. I feel for a lot of F1 fans. And some people said that, this was the day that F1 had a black moment for a while. I mean, F1 had to continue for everyone's sake and all that. But Ayrton Senna will never ever be forgotten. And that's the truth. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. I do.